So welcome along this morning. My name is Anthony O'Malley. I'm currently Senior Methodology Advisor at the Care Inspectorate. Seconded into that post. My normal post is as an inspector in our methodology team, but prior to that I was an inspector in our early learning and childcare teams as well. So I'm familiar with the ELC sector. The aims of our session this morning then will really be looking to provide you an overview of the quality framework for our childcare agencies. We'll talk a little bit about how we use the framework for inspection of childcare agencies, how we use the framework during inspection, some of the other things that go into that inspection process, and we'll also share examples of how self-evaluation can help support improvement in services. So we're joined this morning. We've got Shonad and Lucy, who are two of the inspectors who are assigned to inspect childcare agencies within the Care Inspectorate, and in the background we've also got Colin, who's one of the members of another inspector in the methodology team, and Colin's here just as a bit of technical support in case any of the tech goes wrong and we need to save the slide deck. So we are going to walk through some slides this morning. We've got a couple of wee tools which will hopefully make the slides a wee bit more lively. We've not really used these before, so hopefully they work as intended. If not, hopefully the slides in and of themselves are at least interesting enough. So I'm going to pass over now to Lucy and Shonad.
There we go. Yeah. Hi, I'm Lucy. I'm one of the inspectors in the childcare agency team. I'm one of the 3 inspectors in the childcare agency team. I've not had the opportunity to meet everybody in the services yet, so I think this is a great opportunity for us to come together.
Okay. Morning. I'm Shonad Lowe. I've met some of you before. I've been in the childcare agency team for a number of years, and yeah, I'll be doing some of the slides as well. Next slide. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to chat through this slide. This slide is focusing on how the frameworks have been developed and their purpose. Primarily, it's a tool for services to self-evaluate their service based on what you know are the most important elements of practice that promote positive outcomes. The quality illustrations show examples of weak and examples of very good. These are focused on outcomes for children using the service. We previously tested the framework and we received positive responses. So some of you will have had an inspection with us using the draft framework. So I don't know if anyone would like to maybe pop in the chat how they felt that experience went for them. Feel free to do that as we move through. I think we tested it on 6 services altogether. That's right, yeah. So roughly about 50% had that opportunity to see how that would work and to give us some feedback. So feel free to share that with us either through the chat function, or you might want to come in at the end and have a bit of a chat about that. The framework is aspirational and it is children's rights based. Our key areas and quality illustrations reflect what we know to be the most important aspects of children's care and support. We will discuss how the frameworks are laid out as we go through the presentation. One of the key things we have heard from providers across the whole of the care sector is that the framework provides greater transparency and professional dialogue during inspections, and they'll allow us to develop a shared language. Okay. Next slide, Anthony. Okay. So this slide will look at the key questions and the quality indicators that make up our framework. This framework has 2 key questions and 4 quality indicators that we will evaluate at every inspection. The 3rd key question is related to the service's overall capacity to improve. So this key question is not formally evaluated, but we use this and other tools to help us to determine the evaluations that we award at inspection. We have structured the framework in a way that makes clear which of the quality illustrations apply to all service types. So that will be introduction and supply. And there are additional quality illustrations that only apply to those services who supply staff and have an ongoing relationship with the families. Okay. I'm going to pass over to Shonad, who will discuss the layout of the framework to support services to use it.
So this shows what the actual framework looks like. And this slide looks at how the quality indicators, the key areas and quality illustrations are actually laid out in it. There's also a link to our self-evaluation toolkits, which Anthony will be discussing later. Now, the arrows on the left can show you where you find the quality indicators, the key areas, these fancy arrows that are going up, and the quality illustrations. The QIs are the overarching theme, and these are the things that are given an evaluation at inspection. The key areas show how we've broken up the quality illustrations to reflect different areas of practice. So each of those has a set of quality illustrations. The self-evaluation toolkits explain in more detail how you can use these to evaluate the quality of your service. Now, it's also important to consider your service's aims and objectives and your current families when you're evaluating the quality of your service. These illustrations cover a broad range of practice. We recognise that each of your services is actually unique, and you might choose to focus on like a particular key area or a particular quality illustration because it reflects something that you've identified in your service that you'd like to build on and improve, or like to evaluate how you've progressed when you've actually made those improvements. As you know, we currently don't regulate the part of your services where you supply staff to other regulated care services, so to nurseries and after-school clubs. We look at that part of we look at this during our inspections of those regulated services, but we don't look at it on your inspections. That doesn't mean you can't use this toolkit for those parts of your services. You might still choose to use it as a tool to evaluate those parts of your service. Okay, now next slide. So this slide shows how we've amended our quality frameworks to include a list of core assurances. These core assurances are what we look at on every single inspection. This is because we know that they're the most important things to ensure children's safety and well-being, enabling them to get the most out of life. Sometimes people consider these to be the process or sort of paperworky part of our inspections, but in reality, that's the key part of the inspection because they help us to identify where positive outcomes are happening because you've actually considered the processes and they're not just happening by accident. There's a specific tool in the self-evaluation toolkit that allows you to measure how well you're doing in achieving the core assurances. Anthony will talk some more about that when he talks about the self-evaluation toolkits.
Okay, thanks, Shonad. Lucy, that was a really helpful overview. Hopefully that was helpful for folks. So I'll just expand a wee bit more on the self-evaluation toolkits now before we have the opportunity for any questions or anything that we have. Hopefully that information was helpful for folk. So yeah, I've already introduced myself. As I say, I'm currently seconded in the Senior Methodology Advisor role at the Care Inspectorate, the methodology team in general. So we are responsible for overseeing the development of the self-evaluation toolkits, overseeing development of things like quality frameworks, such as the childcare agencies, one that we're looking at the moment. And we also oversee things like the inspection process, so developing the list of core assurances, the things we'll look at every inspection, and how we'll write our reports, how we make our evaluations. That all sits within the remit of the methodology team. We have a specific mailbox if you have methodology questions about any parts of the Care Inspectorate methodology. We can leave that with you at the end, and you can let us know if there's any questions specifically related to the methodology that we use for inspections. But moving on, so talking about self-evaluation. It's something that we are now as an organisation, so not exclusively in the ELC or childcare agency sector, but as an organisation we are looking more at the purpose and role of self-evaluation. And I think during the pandemic we certainly rolled that out to a number of services quite quickly to start to look at how we could evaluate services or how services could evaluate themselves and how we could then use that information during our sort of scrutiny work or our inspections. How we look at self-evaluation is we look at it as a continuous process and not a one-off event. So it's something that's ongoing, throughout the whole time a service is operating. I think one of the most important things we always like to mention, and right from the start, is it shouldn't be an additional ask. You know, it's not that we're saying services now have to go and start doing something else that they're not already doing. We know, and we'll talk about evidence gathering and stuff in a wee minute, but we know that you're always gathering evidence, whether it's quality assurance stuff, whether it's checklists, whether it's some evaluations you're doing of, you know, yourself or your staff or people's experience of your service. All of that can inform your self-evaluation. So it's not about creating something new, it's about using the information you already know to help develop your service. And we look at it as a way to inform your improvement or development plan, which is one of our core assurances as well. So while we would say that, you know, self-evaluation works best when it's done as an exercise that is for you and your service and the people who use your service for their benefit, it shouldn't be done for the benefit of the regulator. It shouldn't be done in a way that you think the care inspector would like it to be done. It's about doing it in a way that helps inform your improvement plan, your development plan. We recognise that each service is unique. You have a unique staff team, unique service users, people who are using your service. You have lots of other things that make your service unique, and that's why your self-evaluation should be about your service. And it does help to inform your improvement and development plan, which, as I say, is something we would look at each inspection. But self-evaluation and the use of our tools in and of itself is not a mandatory process, but having an improvement or development plan is. And we would say that, really suggest that self-evaluation is a good way to help inform that. So we use a model for improvement at the Care Inspector to support the use of self-evaluation, and I will be sharing links and stuff to the toolkits and the guidance documents that we've developed, and you can find all of that information in there. But this is essentially how it works. It essentially is framed around 3 questions. So there are 3 questions, which are: how are we doing, how do we know, and what are we going to do now? And then, you know, we also suggest that benchmarking that against the 2 key questions from the quality framework, which, as Shona had pointed out, are: how well do we support children's care, play and learning, and how good is our leadership and staffing? So the 2 first bits, so the first things that come first, the 2 parts that come first rather, are how are we doing and how do we know? So the how are we doing is where you consider, well, where are actually we as a service? So in the self-evaluation toolkit, it will show you this as the example we've used is using the 6-point grading scale from the Care Inspector, from that grade of unsatisfactory up to excellent. That's how we've kind of demonstrated it can be measured. That said, it can be measured in any which way you like. Some people use stars, some people use thumbs up, some people use smiley faces, and they have different sliding scales. But essentially, the first thing you have to kind of look at is, well, how are we doing? How do we think we're performing as a service? And we think, okay, so we think we're good. We've got stuff we can work on, but we're good at the moment. Then we think, well, how do we know that? So what is your evidence as to say, you know, why is it coming out that, yeah, we think we're good at this, we could be very good if we did a bit more? How do you know that? And that's very much about gathering your evidence. And like I say, evidence comes in all shapes and forms, and it's generally generated from stuff you're already doing. You know, so if there's records of things like meetings with staff, or responses from families, or personal plan updates, all these things can form your evidence base, and the toolkit goes into that in much greater detail. But effectively what you're doing is establishing a baseline of, well, where are we as a service? What is our evidence that this is how we're performing as a service? And then you're thinking about that 3rd question, which is, what are we going to do now? So that's what next? You know, that's the kind of almost becomes the, well, so what question, the what next? And that might be, okay, so we've identified that we have quite a good performance in one area, but actually, if we did a little bit more work on developing maybe staff knowledge and understanding, or we did a little bit more work with around communication with families on this matter, then that would help us get to the next stage. So that's the what are we going to do now part of it. So it's basically a kind of 3-step process. You know, where are we at the moment? How do we know that's where we are? And what are we going to do now? How are we going to help improve and continue to develop the service? And like we say, it's just an ongoing, continual process. Little bits of the work might be standalone. You might do one little bit of project or one little bit of improvement work, and that kind of stands on itself. But when you think about that, it actually will feed into the wider practice across your service. So it's not that that's self-evaluation in itself is a one-off process or event. And to help with this, we have provided some new resources to support the launch of the quality framework. And we do this with quality frameworks that are most of the quality frameworks now that we produce, or when they're updated, we tweak them in this way. So we have in the past with quality frameworks, you would have had a toolbox within the framework itself, which would have been loads of links to various helpful resources. What we found from that, though, is we don't update the framework documents too frequently. You know, they stand certainly for a period of time, but that's not to say that links will they go to stay for the same period of time. So we've taken a different approach, and we now have created what we would consider to be a virtual toolbox, which lives on the Care Inspectorate Hub. I'll pop a wee link in the chat box to this in a wee moment so that you can go directly to that. But you can see at the on the left-hand side of the screen here, you've got the Scrutiny, Improvement and Support Toolbox. That is within the framework document itself, and there's some links and stuff in there. In the course of preparing for this work, we've discovered that this wee link that says the hub is actually not active at the moment, but our communications team are going to activate that. However, the links that I put in the chat this morning take you to the exact same place, so you'll be able to get them from the chat today. On the right-hand side of the screen here as well, you'll see just where the wee red dot is now. We've got the quality framework for childcare agencies introducing and supplying childcare staff landing page. So that's effectively where you would land on the hub from the link I'll send you this morning, or if you went to our hub and publications and onto the framework page, getting to the childcare agencies one would bring you to this wee page here. So you'll see first of all there's a link straight away to the quality framework document in and of itself. Then there's a link to our self-evaluation tools and guidance, which I'm going to go through in just a moment and show you that what that looks like on our website and what that contains. And then you'll see you've got these two wee white boxes here, which are split up into the two key questions. Each of them has a kind of wee plus sign at the side here, which if you click that will bring up a drop-down menu. And that drop-down menu will contain lots of helpful self-evaluation and improvement resources, maybe links to good practice, maybe links to legislation, depending on what the key question's covering. And it's the information on those links will link back to the key question. And what we do is we periodically go in and make sure those links are working, so it's an actual live toolbox. You know, it's not that kind of case, well, that link's out of date now or that document's out of date. We go in and we update these, and it's kind of virtual toolbox. And again, it's not mandatory that you access or use any of these, but we've just responded to calls from not just the ELC or childcare agency sector, really across the care sector, to say we'd like a bit more support in accessing some of these resources, because it's not always easy to find stuff. There's an awful lot to read, and we don't quite know where it fits with what we're trying to deliver. So the aim of our virtual toolboxes is to try and provide those links within the context of what the key question is saying. And from services and sectors that have had these for a wee while yet, so far, they seem to be finding that quite helpful. So hopefully it is helpful for you in your work as well. I'm just going to pop that hub page link into the chat right now so that you can go directly to that if you want to. As I say, when we send out the link to the recording and stuff, we'll populate all this stuff in that for you as well in the email, so you have all that again to hand there. Okay, so then the self-evaluation toolkit in itself. So like Shonat had mentioned, the core assurances, they highlight what inspectors must look at in inspection, and they really help guide providers on the areas that are important to people's safety and well-being. One of the things we've found is as a regulator, we've had the core assurances for a number of years, but they've not always been easily accessible for services. So in the front of your quality framework now, you now have a list of all the core assurances like you saw on Shonad's slide this morning. With that link as well, that list of core assurances, we've also developed a blank tool, which is basically a list of the core assurances and spaces for you to record how well you're doing with that core assurance or any improvements you need to make. Again, this has been quite well received by our services, who find it a really helpful way to have a good, transparent discussion with the inspector. So they understand, okay, that's what we're looking for in terms of medication. That's what we're looking for in terms of personal plans. It's much clearer. And the toolkit also gives you an opportunity to look at how well you're doing in that area. So the other thing with our self-evaluation toolkits is that we have a general guidance document which explains some of the self-evaluation process. Well, actually explains a lot of it in much more detail than I've gone into this morning, because it's a really detailed document in terms of different parts of the self-evaluation process, lots of things to consider, but it is also fairly high level. So it's not very, you should be able to identify your service within it, because it's for childcare agencies, but it's a relatively high level document in terms of that approach to improving and developing services. We also have a self-evaluation tool, which allows you to start to gather your evidence, think about how well you're doing, think about what that means for you, and think about how you might want to improve. So there's a blank version of that, but we've also provided a worked example. Now, it is just a very generic example. It's not a kind of sort of copy and paste and it would fit your service. We would definitely discourage that. But we also find that when people are first trying to develop a self-evaluation tool, if they've not used one before, it's good to see how it can be laid out, some of the things to think about. So it's a pretty standard example we've given, but it can be used for any area of practice you've identified in your service. It doesn't have to be a core assurance or anything either. Anything you're trying to develop in your service can be applied in the self-evaluation tool. But like I said at the start as well, use of the toolkit is not mandatory whatsoever. There are many services who have been doing things for quite a while around self-evaluation, quality assurance, and that works well for them. And if that works well for your service, we would absolutely encourage you to just please continue to use what you're already using. And ours are a kind of supplementary tool, and there is a wee bit extra help if it's something that you're maybe finding challenging. I'll pop a link into the chat now, which is to the actual, these live on, you can access them from the hub page, but if you wanted to go directly to them, they actually are hosted on the Care Inspector website. So there's a slightly different link for them, but you would be able to get them from that hub landing page as well. Okay, that's that in the chat now. And as well as the things I've mentioned in the toolkit, there are some examples of, how a staff questionnaire, examples of questionnaires and stuff you can use with families. They, like I say, they are just examples. It's entirely up to yourself. If there's anything, you think is useful, please feel free to use it. But if you've got your own tools already and you think they're working well, that's also absolutely fine. So that's a little bit of a kind of general overview, slight whistle-stop tour of our self-evaluation resources that we've got available. Hopefully you'll find them useful if you choose to access them. I'll just check if Shonad and Lucy have got anything they wanted to add on self-evaluation or anything that comes up particularly for childcare agencies.
No, don't think so. No. You've covered it well, Anthony.
Great, thanks very much. So we have got a wee bit of time then, folks, if you wanted to pop any questions in the chat. There is a raise hand function. If you'd rather come on, I can activate your camera and stuff as well, if you would rather come on. We appreciate it. It's, it's a reasonably small group this morning, but we are recording the session as well to upload later, so it can always be helpful to ask some questions. As I said, there is a methodology mailbox at the Care Inspectorate. I'm going to pop the address for that into the chat now. If you had any questions for methodology team or about the framework or anything like that, you can send them to us and we can direct them to the right people. Just popping that into the chat now. And yeah, one of us would pick that up. So I'm not seeing anything popping up in the chat for folk. We've maybe stunned you into silence. It is a Monday morning as well. We appreciate that it's a Monday morning. There's a question from Sarah. So in terms of the recording, Sarah, yeah, so what we will do is basically we'll go up on the Care Inspector at YouTube, so it's accessible. But what we will do is when we email you after this session today, we'll probably send you an email to ask how you found the session and stuff like that. We can put a link in there as well. So it will be uploaded in the Care Inspector at YouTube. That's where the recordings of information sessions go. But we will email you a link to it as well, and it usually goes in things like the provider update as well. And Susan's mentioned the toolkit looks like a good means of information and still not managed to use it yet. And that's the thing as well. We understand as well that services are really, really busy, and we find that actually that's why the toolkits can be quite helpful, because they're a good framework, a good starting point, to help kick that off, and then it becomes a kind of rolling process. So that's helpful to hear. Anything else, folks? Is there any further questions that anyone's got? Before we sign off this morning, we'll give you a little bit of your time back. It has been a reasonably small group, and hopefully you found it helpful. But like I say, there is the methodology mailbox there if you've got any questions, or I'm sure Sean and Lucy would agree. You're always welcome to speak to your case holding inspector. Because don't sit worried about stuff. It's always easier to just give us a quick call or an email, and we can usually put minds at ease and stuff like that. Okay, well, I think that's us then, folks. I don't see anything else coming up in the chat. So all that remains for us to do is, so there is one that's come in.
One.
Oh yeah, again, it's just we understand absolutely how busy it can be, and that it's often perhaps a small team of people involved as well. There's just a wee bit more activity in the chat, so we'll just hold off a minute in case people are wanting to pop some more in. Yeah, any hints from other providers? Yeah, I see you're chatting about that, Susan. If on our on the Care Inspector YouTube at the moment, now it's not childcare agencies, because like I say, it's a new framework and stuff. There is a couple of videos of providers in different service types talking to inspectors or our improvement team about how they've used self-evaluation. Some of it might not be translatable, but a lot of it might be as well. So please feel free to check that out, because there is some videos there about other providers talking through some of those things about how did they manage it, because we understand that that's often the key, because it's coming from the provider and not the regulator. In regards to setting up some sort of social group or something like that, we'd be, providers are more than happy to do that, but as a regulator, obviously we couldn't necessarily be involved in those kind of things. But we're yeah, as I say, happy for you to check out the resources there. Yeah, and I can already see there's some stuff going on in the chat about sorting that out. So that's great. If today works as a networking opportunity for you as well, fantastic. It's all about helping as much as we can. Okay, that seems like that's us for this morning, folks. Thank you very much for your time. We'll now close down the meeting so that the recording stops. And if you've got any questions, please use the contact details we've provided. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Thanks. Bye.